Hello everyone, and welcome to Book My Therapy. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome someone who has made an incredible impact in the world of mental health, especially right here in our own Kitchener-Waterloo community, Melissa Reid. She's a registered social worker with over 20 years of work experience supporting individuals through grief, trauma, and life's most difficult transitions. She is the KW Oktoberfest Women of the Year 2025 and also the founder of Calming Tree Counselling in South Kitchener, Ontario, a place many have come to know as a safe, compassionate, and inclusive space for healing. As the heart behind Calming Tree, Melissa leads a diverse team of mental health professionals with empathy, clarity, and purpose. She is deeply committed to making mental health support more human and more accessible and person centered. Melissa, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much. What a lovely introduction. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you. I have a few questions for you in
Yeah.
different segments. The first one being about your personal journey and professional philosophy. So, your journey in mental health care spans over 2 decades. What initially drew you to this field, and how has your perspective evolved over the years?
Yeah, thank you. Well, my journey really started in tragedy, to be honest, in that 23 years ago, our son died, and it left a huge impact on myself, my family, understandably. And in our grief, we reached out to a non-for-profit organization here in Kitchener-Waterloo called Bereaved Families of Ontario. And we're supported by peers and in group settings and individually. And it really impacted me in a way that I went to them very shortly into my own experiences that I want to help others that are experiencing this as well. Um, so over a, at least a decade, I ended up becoming a peer support facilitator. Then I ended up on every board and a committee that they had available for me to work on, and eventually became the executive director of that organization. And in doing that, realized the gaps in our community. So many times we were getting referrals to our organization, which again, I want to emphasize was a peer organization. So we did not have professional counseling in our organization. And we were being referred to for cases that were really complex or needed more support than a peer could give. And I recognized in that there really wasn't the same support in the community professionally that we had through this organization. And so it motivated me to go back to school, finish my degree, and I got a master's in social work to be able to provide the support in the community that I saw that was missing.
Wow, that's a great journey. I mean, being in a place where you were on the other end to now being in a situation where you are empowering others, that's commendable. Thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry for your loss.
Oh, thank you so much.
Um, so I know that you're a clinical supervisor as well, right? So what are some of the common challenges do you observe among emerging therapists, and how do you guide them through these hurdles?
Yeah. So I think one of the most common, I'm going to say two of the most common. The first one is the perfectionist part of us. So I see a lot of graduating students or new clinicians really navigating this idea of to be the professional in the room means we need to be perfect, and the pitfalls and really high demands on ourselves when we come at any profession from that perspective. So really supporting them to examine how they see a therapist and how they see their role as a therapist in the world, and hopefully helping them to untangle those ideas of perfectionism. The other one I see often and is imposter syndrome, right? This place where I didn't, like, if people find out who I really am or how I really am, I don't deserve to be here. And again, I don't think this is an uncommon experience for people that have pursued education for a long period of time. They're used to it is a big transition that we don't talk about going from post-secondary and graduate school into working. And and so I think that it really impacts people's identities. And and so that plays into this imposter syndrome. And and part of that is really working with them to again examine what are their expectations, how did they get here? Uh, Also, how did they fool everybody, right? So a little bit of like challenging some of these, again, cognitive distortions that a lot of us navigate that really influence that imposter syndrome.
Wow. Well, so I just took a minute to process this because, I've been in therapy and from where I operate, I see therapist as perfection because it kind of like I assume that they would know everything and they would know answers to everything, but it's they're human beings, right? And then
Right.
just to even think about it, as what you said, it's taking a minute to process. But thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And again, some of that perfection does come from like how we're held in the room. And part of the important part about being a therapist is we don't bring our stuff to the room to our client. We know and understand where to take that and where to get support. And our humanness is a very therapeutic component of working with our clients. So ensuring that we're not stuck in that perfection piece and really engaging with our own humanness to meet our clients where they're at. Yeah.
Beautiful. So, what advice would you give to therapists who are right now interested or in the about to start their career in mental health?
Hmm. Find a good support system, right? Find
Wow.
your community, whatever that looks like. And there's so many different communities in the therapeutic world, whether it's a modality that you love working with, right? If you're really into DBT, find the people that are really into DBT. You'll feel like the support and the welcoming and the belonging. If you're a solo practitioner, find other solo practitioners in your community. Do meetups once a month, do peer support, like supervision, ensuring that you have good support around you and community connections really helps to ground us in who we are and who we want to be in the world. And then also find supports that are not about being a therapist. Like,
Yeah.
right? Find your groups that enhance your hobbies or other identities. Because it helps to really ground us again in that humanness and remind us of who we are so we can be fully in the room with our clients. I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Well said.
Thank you.
So, we are in the age of AI. So, this is the next question that I had. So, are there any emerging careers for mental health professionals that you see are promising, especially in this time?
So I have some colleagues who are looking for ways to engage AI therapeutically, and one of the I think emerging ways that we're accessing AI is in our note-taking, assessment building. I'm seeing more and more of my colleagues um, engage AI scripts. So essentially, and I know that there's other healthcare professionals, so people may have experienced this in other therapy models, like a doctor or a nurse practitioner. So the AI scribe is on, it listens to the therapy session. And then for the therapist, what it does is it synthesizes the note taking and assessment building, which really gives us some time back. Those are pieces of our job that often take up more time than we'd like. And it's time outside the room. Um, so I see that as a really helpful component and a promising way that AI can be supportive to us. And on the flip side, I'm really cautious because I am seeing more and more people talking about AI. ChatGPT is an example that you use, so I'll use that one of using it. as an alternative to therapy. And while I completely can empathize with the inaccessibility that therapy being a privatized component of our mental health system for a large number of people. I can understand the accessibility of ChatGPT. The difficulty is most of us don't know how to effectively use ChatGPT um, so that it's taking perspective and not necessarily just sitting in a validating kind of
Yeah.
perspective for us. So the thing about therapy, which is very different from being with your friends or using
Yeah.
AI models, is it is not about agreeing with you. It's not
Yeah.
about telling you that you're right or that everything that you say or experience is valid. While we're going to want to come from that place as we start out the work, it's about perspective taking. It's about hearing what you're saying and understanding your values and asking deeper questions around, are you in alignment with your values right now when you're, experiencing this? Or, you know, is this the only perspective in the room when you're talking about that conflict with the other person? And so it's really opening up perspective taking and enriching that self-awareness and self-reflection. And I haven't seen the ChatGPT or AI models really capable of doing that without human guidance,
I
right?
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
The next section is about therapeutic practice and trauma work. Um, Grief and trauma are central themes in your practice. So, how do you approach these complex emotions with clients, and what strategies have you found most effective in helping them heal?
Yeah. So, I mean, here's the piece that is maybe central to this work is I'm the container for clients to learn how to heal themselves, which is a really interesting piece. And we see some people come to therapy being like, okay, well, you are going to heal me. And the interesting thing is, if I heal you, I would be healing you from a Melissa perspective. And that's not what you need because you're not me. So, the first place is to set up the containment for the client, that they understand that this place is compassionate and secure and safe and boundaried so they can start doing the work that they need to do to heal. I think in my early work, I didn't understand the importance of that in the same way as I understand it now. The other piece I would say is I definitely come from an emotion focused, somatic perspective, which really is central to themes in working with trauma. Trauma is held in our bodies. We know this. We can definitely think about trauma. We can definitely, people would tell you that their memories, their flashbacks, their intrusive thoughts are happening in their mind. And that is absolutely true. And oftentimes it's from responses in our bodies. So I definitely approach therapy differently than I did in the beginning of my work, where it was much more centered in maybe a CBT modality. And while I think that's a helpful tool, I do approach especially trauma with much more of a somatic based lens. Um, and grief is one of those things that I approach with the container and the narrative, like listening to people's stories, really being with them without expectations, without um, prescriptions for how they're supposed to be or where they're supposed to be at a certain time. So, really giving them the opportunity to be heard compassionately about the experience that they've had with the person who has died or the loss that they've experienced. Um, and to normalize the humanness of that. I think the other piece that's happened is we've really gotten away from normalizing grief as a human experience.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting take. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Again, I think part of it is, I mean, there's so many layers to this, so I will only definitely dive into a couple of layers. One of the things that has happened in westernized countries, such as Canada, is we've gotten away from dying. We've gotten away from death. We've medicalized it and hospitalized it. And as a result, I see so many people have more fear toward it, right? Which means that we may not be accompanying people as they die in the same ways that we would have before. And we talk about it in hushed tones. We aren't necessarily seeking out supports in our community or having people come around us during that process. And as a result, the impacts are in grief, we often have a very small sense of community and the way that grief has been impacted is just like death has been medicalized, hospitalized, and kind of taken out of the family or community experience. We've done something similar with grief in that the funeral and or afterlife care has been now based more in an employment model, which is we're given 2 to 5 days to take time off work to help transition that person from death into whatever rituals or mourning practices we might have. And so people tend to try to put their grief into those short time periods as well, right? And what we know is people oftentimes are really in a shock oriented, just getting through the steps that they need to get through in that short window after someone's died. So in that, not talking about death, we don't talk about grief. And then the fact that people are mourning and grieving weeks, months, years afterwards is pathologized into abnormal responses, right? So it is a really unfortunate thing that we're seeing culturally. And there's also some brilliant work happening around this. One of those would be griefmatters.ca is a burgeoning organization led by two women and professors who've been working in the areas of grief who are working on grief literacy. Like, let's
Wow.
talk, right? Let's talk about grief. Let's use the words. Let's say things like death and dying, and grief to normalize these really human experiences.
Wow.
Yeah,
I have that question about you mentioned about death, right? But people can grieve the loss of relationship as well. Grieving also occur in relationships, which
absolutely. Yeah, great um, bringing together of these concepts in that, yes, I have, unfortunately, in this conversation, been limiting the talk around grief to death, but the other components are really around the different ways we lose and experience loss. And in what you're saying, like this understanding that we may gain through harmful or unhelpful childhood as we start reflecting and untangling and experiencing and understanding in adulthood the things that were harmful or unhelpful, we are going to grieve. We are going to grieve that family that we didn't have or the relationships or experiences that we didn't have. That's one example. Another one is, job loss, relationships ending, friendship breakups, the death of a pet or an animal that again, isn't necessarily normalized, pregnancy losses. Um, there's so many different, I mean, parenthood. I often say to people, this is an overlooked area as well. The amount we lose in parenthood from that infant that comes home to that preschooler that goes off to school to that teenager that wants autonomy to that adult child who now is starting their own life experiences and family and isn't relying on us in the same way. There's so many ways that we grieve um, that are really normal to grieve, but aren't necessarily normalized, right? So yeah, I like that. Thank you for bringing that
oh no,
attention.
thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you for giving me that space. And it's really helpful and that people are actually opening up and talking about grief. So I'll definitely link the griefmatters.ca in the description so that it's
Okay.
easily accessible for people to go check out resources whenever they need. So thank
Awesome.
you. Thank you for sharing. Um, the next section is about bereavement, which, you know, does bring a sense of disorientation, not just sadness, and a disruption of identity, routine, and meaning. In your experience, what is it about bereavement that makes it so uniquely difficult to cope with, and how can we begin to gently rebuild? our lives around the absence?
Yeah. You know, and I love that you added things like identity. Um, One of the things that often happens for people, and regardless of whether this is a relationship of someone that is loved and cared for, or someone that we're estranged from, who we might not have had the relationship that we wanted with, there is often a disorientation around identity. We identify ourselves in so many different ways, um, and have so many different aspects of ourselves that make us who we are. And a lot of those are attached to relationships, right? They might be that I'm a daughter, or that I'm a sister, or that I'm a mom. In addition to I'm a business owner or I'm a therapist. And so when we experience deaths that end those relationships or redefine those relationships, it can really pull on our sense of identity, right? Depending on how reliant we were on that identity and relationship and our experience of it, our attachment to it. And so I love the word disorientation because I think that's a really good way of putting it. I often talk to people like grieving is natural, but it feels abnormal,
Yeah.
right? Um, and so the other piece, and can you give me the second part of the question because it's fading for me?
No, no, for sure. So how can we begin to gently rebuild our life around that absence?
Yeah. So one of the things that I find often bereaved people experience and is what Robert Niemeyer talks about in meaning making. Now, here's the thing. I want to be really cautious in introducing this idea. I do not want someone who is supporting someone who's grieving to go, you just need to make meaning of this and everything will be okay. It's not that direct of a intervention. But a lot of times, what we see is people through their work, whether it's in their families, communities, support systems, or whether it's in therapy. Because here's the thing about bereavement: it does not require therapy in order to process, support ourselves, and grieve. Um, it's redefining that relationship and maybe making meaning for ourselves about what that relationship means to us, what this loss means to us. Um, in for my own life and my story, the meaning that I made out of my son's death was to pursue an education, was to support people. It doesn't have to be that lofty, but those are ways that we can see meaning making in my own story. And the other piece would be about continuing bonds. And this has been explored by a lot of different theorists um, of how do we now relate to that person in a different way? And how do we continue that relationship in a meaningful way now that they're not physically available to us? And there's lots of different ways people do it and have been doing it for as long as we've existed. One way that we can think about is, having a picture out about them. And when people ask, we talk about them. That's a continuing bond, right? Um, and one of the things we know as well in terms of bereavement is supportive, compassionate communities really help people to feel welcome to grieve. And in many ways, that supports a healthy bereavement. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Mhm.
So, with bereavement, I have also noticed that there is a certain guilt that comes. Um, I don't know what to name it. Is it the survivor's guilt? Is it something else? So, how does one cope with this guilt?
Yeah. So I will say that not everybody feels guilt in the experience of grief or death, um, in loss. But I often let people sit with guilt, which sounds maybe a bit mean because guilt is such an uncomfortable feeling, but often guilt doesn't give us the answers right away. Because as we explore guilt, oftentimes people will say, well, I don't feel guilty. Like, I know I didn't do anything to cause this. So that's not the guilt, right? And um, I know they wouldn't want me to feel this way. So we really sit with guilt for a while and listen to it and like let it tell us what is it about. And maybe it's we feel guilty that we are feeling joy at times when we think we shouldn't be. And I often tell people like joy is a part of grief as well. Um, we may feel guilt around not thinking about them today when in the early stages of our grief, we are thinking about them all the time. Often people notice that one day that they didn't think about them, and then guilt can come in. So sometimes it's the misconceptions of what we're supposed to or should be doing. And I put that in air quotes because one of the first interventions I talk about often with people is, can we let the shoulds go here? Right? Can we let go of these expectations or beliefs that we have centered around how we're supposed to grieve well, right? And just let us grieve the way that we intuitively want to grieve, um, and pay attention to how it supports us.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a fresh perspective that I never had, but I completely resonate with what you just said. Because I lost my grandma when I was here in Canada at COVID times. I couldn't go back. And the guilt does lie heavily on me sometimes. And when I do feel joy, especially like now, it's been about 4 years that she's not here. Um, I can exactly relate to like, am I supposed to feel happy? Am I supposed to feel sad? What am I doing with my life? Like blame and the guilt. So thank you. That's a fresh perspective. It completely resonates. So thank you so much for sharing.
And thank you for sharing about your grandma. It's still so fresh, right? Oftentimes we don't recognize 4 years is a really short period of time to be without someone who you had for your life up until that moment. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that too. Thank you.
This section is about connection, community, and looking ahead. So can you speak about the role of community and connection in the healing process, both within therapy and in everyday life?
Yeah. So the one that I am thinking about was the study that was done in Australia, and it looked at what was required to support people well and how people that were grieving had best outcomes. And one of the leading things that they saw over and over again was this idea of compassionate community. When people had connection and compassionate community, they had quality of life scores that were thriving. Um, and so really extending this out to, and we know and we see, uh, and in COVID, they've done studies around this, around the loneliness spike that we're seeing and mental health spikes. And we're seeing them grow around the same um, rate as one another. And that to me really speaks to, we need each other. We thrive in connection with one another. Um, and there is an impact when we don't have that connection and sense of community. So for a lot of us, it's finding what community means. And and I would say like that can sometimes be hard work. I can appreciate that. As we leave our homes or as we leave our family and start our own lives, we may be leaving a community that didn't serve us anymore, whether it's from our families or our belief systems or our culture or society, whatever, and seeking out new communities. And that can be tough work, but it's important work. And I see a lot of people in my practice who that's a component that I'm encouraging them to engage with, right? Where are your communities? And it can be things like I have clients who it's pickleball, right? They go to a pickleball league once a week. For other people, it's and again thinking about Pride Month this month, it's the LGBTQSL community, right? Who are um, their supports and their chosen families who are helping them thrive. For other people, it's finding a faith and a community around religion. So, like, there are so many different ways that we might find community, but we thrive when we are connected to others. Yeah.
Beautiful. So the next is about therapy. So for those who feel hesitant about seeking therapy, what would you say to help them take that first important step?
I think the very first thing I would say is that makes total sense. It makes sense that you might feel hesitant about doing something new or something uncomfortable or something unknown. regardless of what it is. And for someone who's never been to therapy before, that would check all the boxes. And one of the things that I think we don't talk about enough is that anxious fear response is not meant to drive us backwards all the time. Sometimes it's meant to propel us forward. It's easier to stay comfortable than to be uncomfortable, but we know that in discomfort is oftentimes where people grow,
Yeah.
um, and learn and change. So I would first normalize that feeling and say, of course, it makes complete sense. And are you ready to see what you could learn, change, or grow? And if you are, therapy could be a place where you could start that process and that journey. Yeah.
Very nice. So, this is the last question. So, looking ahead, what are your aspirations for Calming Tree Counseling and for the broader mental health community in the Kitchener area?
Yeah. Such a great question, and one that I think I uh, struggle with or, you know, work with on a regular basis. We've had a lot of change this year. We've done a lot of things to situate ourselves in a different space in our community. And so part of that for me is resting a little bit in all the change that we've done, and appreciating that we have engaged in so much change. Um, one of the things that has always been important to me is to be a community practice of choice for therapists who want to work here and then for clients as well. And doing that for me is about engaging with my therapist, checking in on them, ensuring that they have what they need to thrive. Again, ensuring that they feel connected to one another. I really see the benefit of therapists having a team orientation, regardless of where or how they work. Um, and really spending time with my team this next year to help them thrive because I really believe when they're thriving, the clients are thriving as a result of that trickle down effect. Um, and then I think lastly for us is um, growing different aspects of our team. So right now we service anyone in a family dynamic. And what I mean by that, to be clear, is we service children and youth. We provide therapy to individuals and relationships of any working, and then and families and couples. And so building the teams in those different areas, right? Building our children's team, building our individual adult team, and building our relationship team. So just ensuring that the support is there um, is going to be really important for Calming Tree as we move forward.
That's so nice. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Okay, promise this is the last. Where can people find you?
We are online at www.calmingtree.ca. We are in the Dune South area. So we're at the corner of Homer Watson and Pioneer Drive. Um, you can call and talk to our admin. She's here live and in person, and that's Hannah at 519-208-2256. And we're on social media, Instagram and Facebook, Calming Tree or Calming Tree Counseling. I think I forget which one is which, but they are linked to each other as well. And we provide both in-person and virtual counseling. So we hope to cater to what our clients need, and those are the things that we're hearing that they're looking for.
Perfect. I will also link all the links in the description so that it's easy for anyone to access it whenever they need it. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you, and it was a very, very good conversation. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I've appreciated this conversation as well.
Thank you.